Hello, welcome along to the Fun Kids Science Weekly. Thanks for having a listen. My name's Dan. This is your weekly journey to find the secrets of the universe. Like this massive thing that we all live in that's constantly growing outwards like a balloon, we're on the hunt to find out all the most miraculous and incredible things that are going on inside it. This week, we're learning about a scorpion with the most devastating and terrifying name in the wild. Also, we'll talk about how some planets are formed. We'll meet the winner of this year's Young Imagineers competition. We spoke about this a few months ago. We've got the winner on the show later on. He's developed these tiny little brain spiders. And as always, I'll answer some of your questions. Today, they're all about bats, lisps, and logic. It's on the way after we learn about how some of the things that you use every single day are made. This is Sir Sidney McSprocket.
How's it made?
Oh, hello, Sir Sidney McSprocket here. I've been in action capturing facts all about manufacturing. It's for this rather splendid stipendiary compendium I'm compiling. You just ask it how something is made, and it'll oblige with a fulsome explanation. Now today, I thought we'd take a closer look at something right under our feet. Carpet! Oh, now, how do you suppose that's made? Let's find out.
Step 1.
Carpets are made out of an enormous quantity of yarn. That's a tufty thread that might be a natural material like wool or a manufactured synthetic material. Whichever it is, the yarn is wound onto a lot of spools. Well, these are small rollers from which the carpet will be woven.
Step 2.
The back of the carpet will be a tough material such as a polypropylene or a natural fibre like jute. It needs to be strong to hold the yarn firmly in place and withstand lots of wear and tear.
Step 3.
Now it's time to weave the carpet. This process is called tufting. Hundreds of needles stitch the yarn to the backing material. The more needles per centimetre, the more luxurious the carpet will feel. Cameras watch the weave, and if any yarn breaks, it can be quickly replaced. And to make sure the stitches don't come loose, a further backing layer will be glued to the underside.
Step 4.
Some carpets are one colour. Some have very fancy patterns. Computers will direct the machinery how, when and where to use different colour yarns in the weaving process.
Step 5.
Sometimes screen printing is used to print a pattern. This requires a special dye, and once the pattern is printed on, it'll need to be thoroughly dried.
Step 6.
The final stage is to give the carpet a shave to make sure it has an even finish, and then it'll be steamed to fix the yarn into its shape forever. It's then rolled up and ready for dispatch to the shops. Carpets have been around almost as long as there have been houses, and originally would have been woven by hand. Now, I must get on, but come back soon and find out more about manufacturing with my splendid stipendiary compendium.
How's it made? With support from the Royal Commission for the 1851 exhibition. Find out more at funkidslive.com.
Right, let's do my favourite part of the show. This is where you turn me into like a science Sherlock. And I do all the research to find out the answers to the questions that you leave for us over on the Apple Podcast Store. Now, our first one today is from Luke, who is 8.5, who asks, why are some bats, and owls nocturnal? Well, I think it's a more general question about nocturnal animals, really. The reason why a lot of animals do thrive at night is because there's less predators out there to try and catch them. You know, it's safer for a lot of them. It's also much easier for them to find their prey that they need to eat because perhaps they're going to munch on something that aren't nocturnal and who are sleeping. Now, over time, these creatures have evolved and they've learned to stay quiet and sleep during the day when huge humans are bustling around. And mostly, they've always got special adaptations to help them out while they're out in the dark. like owls have special eyes, cats have them too, that help them see well in the dark. And bats, they use echolocation. A lot of people think bats are blind, but they're not. Most of them aren't. Anyway, they use echolocation to get around, which is where they make a sound and then they can judge where they are and what's around them depending on how quickly the sound comes back to their ears. So thank you very much for that, Luke. This question is from Gillian, who is in Texas, who asks, why do some people have lisps? Now, a lisp is a speech impediment which affects sibilant sounds, so that's your S's and your Z's, things that go tss. Most, Gillian, are caused by putting your tongue in the wrong place when you speak. Now, something called tongue thrust is the usual cause of this. This is when your tongue sticks out too far in your teeth, in front of the like the vampire-like dagger teeth that you've got. Your tongue sticks in front of those. Most of us, we have this tongue thrust when we're born. But most people that lose this behaviour by about 6 months old, some people don't, so they develop lisps, so they need to have it trained out of them using speech therapy. Thank you for that, Gillian, and thanks for listening all the way in Texas. And lastly, with our questions today, we have Theo in London who wants to know, how do some people solve a Rubik's Cube so quickly? Well, thank you for asking this, Theo, because it gives me the chance to say, I can do a Rubik's Cube. I can do it in about 3 minutes if you give me the chance. Now, how I do it, I don't know any of the logic involved. I learned it like a cheat code for a game. You know, you just memorise the patterns, what your fingers need to do to make it work. And I think that's the case for most people. Now, some people can do it really quickly because they have a photographic memory. So they know exactly where all the pieces are and they can imagine it in their mind to let it twist the right way. Also, here's a secret. Quite often, they'll put something like Vaseline in the middle of the Rubik's Cube so it spins much faster. They remember where each piece is. And the only way they can get to do it this quickly is by practice. So if you want to learn the Rubik's Cube, you need to practice and practice and practice. Thank you very much for the question, Theo. If you've got something that you want answered on this show, you need to leave it as a review for us over on the Apple Podcast Store. It's the Fun Kids Science Weekly. Now, this week saw a tragic natural disaster in New Zealand. The volcano on White Island erupted. And we need to find out more on the show, really. So we've got Dr. Matthew Blackett, who is a professor of natural hazards at Coventry University. He's on to tell us all about it. Hey, Matt.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you so much for joining us. So, when did scientists first get ideas that this was happening?
Well, I think, from my understanding, the first idea that we had of it was reports of an explosion and people seeing an explosion happening either from boats near the island or from the mainland. And
looking at it in retrospect, were there any signs that perhaps we could have picked up on? Do you know? Are there things that volcanoes always classically do, or was this one a bit of a surprise, like too much of a surprise? Did it not play by the rules?
This one certainly did not play by the rules. So in a normal situation, before a volcanic eruption, we usually see that perhaps the ground starts to swell up as the magma is building up beneath the surface, or perhaps the volcano starts to get hot, and we can monitor that quite easily. The problem with this volcano is that the eruption wasn't due to magma and lava, as we expect, but it was due to water making its way through the rock, touching that magma under the ground, and then exploding, quite simply. So there was no precursor, there was no indication beforehand that this was about to happen.
So what was it that shot out of the top of the volcano? Is it magma, or was it water?
Well, it was actually steam and rock. So the magma is probably still buried down beneath the rock, but the hot water was touching it, was in contact with it, and it would have vaporized almost immediately, turned to steam expands, and it would have shot up all of the hot rock above it. So what you see in those images is a lot of volcanic steam and a lot of small particles of rock, very, very hot rock.
You say the water, which is seeping through the cracks underneath the ground, and it contacted this lava that's underneath there. Why did it instantly explode?
Because water does that. So the second magma is perhaps 1,000 degrees, so a lot hotter than the oven that you have at home, perhaps. And if water touches that, you see how it fizzes away. Well, imagine water touching something that's 4 times hotter than that, and it's underground, it's trapped there, there's very high pressure. So the second the water touches that, it expands, and it causes this explosion that is what caused what we saw a few days ago.
So how did water come into contact with it? Is it how unusual is it for water to seep through the cracks and make its way into a volcano like this?
It's quite usual. I mean, a volcano is solid rock, but there's obviously lots of cracks in there and some loose rocks. So any rainfall that arrives will percolate through and interact, will touch the hot rocks beneath the surface. Most of the time, that turns to steam and it makes its way back to the surface and steams away through what we call fumaroles, which are just little kind of steam chimneys. But in this situation, the rocks were much more compressed together. So there was no option, there was no way for the gases to escape in a harmless way. So they built up and up to drive this big eruption that we saw.
Now, you've already said that this was much different to ones that we have seen before. We have discussed volcanoes on the show, but maybe it's worth going over it. Can you just very briefly give us an explanation of how normal volcanic eruptions happen and why they do?
Sure. So if we think of the planet of the Earth, imagine an egg. Okay, the egg shell is the crust. That's what we live on. Okay, and beneath the crust, things are not solid. They're a bit liquidy. And that liquid in the earth is actually very, very hot. And it is all the time trying to make its way to the surface. Now, in some situations, it makes its way to the surface, perhaps through cracks in that crust or in the eggshell. And when it does, it makes its way to the surface very, very quickly. It's very, very hot, and it drives volcanic eruptions as we see. As the hot rock makes its way to the surface, it also releases lots of gases. It's the gases generally that cause an explosion, and then behind that follows the lava flows that we're used to seeing.
Now, this one, as we've said, was unlike any other. Is there anything that science can learn to perhaps stop the unexpectedness of what happened in White Island happening in the future? Have we learned something about the signs that we can look out for?
In terms of signs, as far as I'm aware, there were none that were immediately kind of drawn to any scientist's attention. For this sort of volcano that erupts, we'd call it sporadically and without warning, the only real safe method that we have is to keep people away. It's not like the volcanoes that we perhaps see at Mount Etna in Sicily, where we know a few days' notice that the volcano is about to become active. When we're looking at a volcano like at White Island, there is no indication. So, in all honesty, it's safer for these situations to keep people away so that if there isn't an eruption such as this, people aren't in harm's way.
Right, okay. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us all about it. It's been a real treat.
No problem.
Now, this week's Dangerous Dan needs no real reason why it's going to go in our list. I mean, I can pretty much sum it up just with its name. Have a listen to this and tell me how it can't be deadly. It's the black, spitting, thick-tailed scorpion. Oh, its real scientific name is Parabuthus transvalicus. It's one of the most dangerous types of scorpions that you find in the South African deserts. It's this big, brutal brute. It's got a thick body, a brown, blacky colour. It's got these long, slender pincers, perfect for clipping, and it's got this huge, curling tail. And its stinger is as wide as its tail, which is quite unusual for a scorpion. Usually the stinger is quite small. This one is massive, and it's a stinger that can spit venom. It sprays it, it shoots it out, and its venom is so toxic it can cause extreme pain, paralysis, and even death. That's the black-spitting, thick-tailed scorpion of South Africa, and just its name is getting it a place on our Dangerous Dan list. Let's have a look at what's going on up in the sky all around the world right now, finding out some climate trends across the globe with Marina Ventura.
Marina Ventura's Climate Explorers.
Hi there, Marina Ventura here. I love finding out about the natural world, and that includes the Earth's climate. We know that weather can change from one day to the next, but climates can change too over the time span of years, centuries, or even longer. So I'm on a mission to fill MapApp with the latest climate information with the help of some awesome climate explorers. Come on then, let's go. We are lucky that most of us live in comfortable homes and have enough to eat. Just imagine if we didn't. What would we do? Maybe we'd move somewhere else, if we could. But what if we couldn't? Now, other than our pampered pets, animals don't live in houses, but they do have habitats. Places that are safe and comfortable for them to live in with enough sources of food to keep them going. As climates change, these habitats can change too. Isn't that right, Mappy?
It certainly is. Animals and plant life are affected by climate change just as much as humans can be. And whilst most species can cope and adapt with gradual changes, rapid changes and the loss of natural habitats can create challenges for wildlife.
Let's find out more from someone who studies a very interesting animal in a very beautiful place.
Hi, I'm Rose and I'm a conservation scientist. I study animals and the food they eat, and that's something that can change as the climate changes. Changing climates can affect wildlife in lots of ways. Some animals, like frogs and newts, are very sensitive to temperature and may die if their homes become much warmer or colder. A changing climate may affect the vegetation that grows, and this might mean that there isn't enough for the animals to eat, or may mean that animals can't safely nest or build homes. Sometimes the animals might be able to migrate or move to a new habitat, but if not, animals can be short of food and may die out. I work on tropical islands and study the Aldabra giant tortoise, carefully looking at what they eat, so we can understand what we call food webs. What's eating what, or who's eating who.
But there must be a lot of tortoises to study. How on earth do you figure out what they've had for dinner?
It's the poo that tells us what the tortoises had to eat. We look at the plant DNA found in the poo, and this tells us exactly which plants the tortoises have been eating. Food webs can give us information about the effect of climate change on animal populations and how they are changing too.
So, how has the change in climate affected the tortoises?
Well, the island where these tortoises came from originally is called the Aldabra Atoll. It's a place in the Indian Ocean that's at risk of being submerged because of rising sea levels. If this happens, these tortoises could die out. Luckily, some tortoises have been moved by scientists to other islands in the Indian Ocean where different types of tortoises have already become extinct. We're looking at what the tortoises eat in their new homes to see how their presence affects the food web.
Lucky tortoises having you on their side. Thanks, Rose. We share the world with millions of varieties of plants and animals, and all of them are affected by changes in the climate. And we might not think they affect us, but don't forget, humans are part of a food web too.
All this talk of food is making me hungry for an upload.
Ready, Mappy?
Load me up.
Next time, we'll be looking at what you can do to help reduce the impact we have on our environment.
Marina Ventura's Climate Explorers, supported by the Natural Environment Research Council, the science of the natural world. Find out more at funkidslive.com/marina.
It's the Fun Kids Science Weekly. Now, we've spoken on the show over the past few months about the Young Imagineers competition. Do you remember this? They ask you a question every year. They're challenging you to come up with an idea that can change the world, that can make it a better place. And so many people entered, and I've got the winner on the phone. It's Balsam. He's from Croydon. Balsam, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Dan. How are you today?
I'm brilliant. Congratulations. You won the Young Imagineers 2019. How does it feel?
Well, for many people like me, it's very exciting, and I'm just really happy.
Now, you came up with the micro spider. Can I just take you back, Balsam? When you first heard about the Young Imagineers competition, when you decided that you wanted to enter it, what made you come up with this idea? We'll talk about what it is in a second, but what made you come up with the idea?
Well, to be honest, the general idea of it came very quickly because of my grandmother. She suffers from epilepsy. So, to be honest, that idea, because it's really painful to sometimes see her with her epilepsy. So the idea just came straight away to me, to be honest.
So you wanted to come up with a way to make her feel better and perhaps to make her brain and people's brain function better, and that's what you came up with the micro spider.
Yeah.
Can you just talk us through what the micro spider does, what it looks like, how it will help your grandmother and other people out?
Well, what it mainly does, it goes into the brain, and then it kind of repairs it and cures it. It can start stitch and cut, and then kind of inject chemicals and suck out bad chemicals into parts of the brain.
And these are tiny, aren't they, Balsam?
Yeah, microscopic.
Microscopic robo-spiders. They're intelligently programmed to work together in groups of 40 to 50 and even 60. Now, I know that, we've not made it as a physical thing yet, but you say that you want them to be programmed to work together. How do you imagine them talking together while they're inside your body?
Well, to be honest, I think they would kind of have their own type of language and they'd communicate through the head, because I feel in the head of the invention and kind of be a bit of programming, because there'd be a bit of kind of spare space there which they could communicate with.
And can you
the technology inside.
Can you just describe to us how you imagine it to look like?
Well, to be honest, I was imagining it kind of looked like an actual spider, so it would have 6 normal legs to walk around and kind of move around with it, and then the front 2 would kind of be slightly different to do some of the stitching and cutting.
And how would I get it inside my body?
Well, to be honest, what you would do, you would put all 60 into a pill, which you would then swallow. It would then go through your digestive system into your bloodstream, and then the magnetic force could pull it up to your brain.
Ah, magnetic force. It's got a pretty ingenious way of powering itself, doesn't it, as well, Balsam? Can you tell us about that?
Well, like a real-life water wheel, water wheels are used to make power. A normal water wheel would, of course, be used by water and push around the wheel to make a supply energy. But as the microspider is in the bloodstream, the blood will push the water wheel around and give it some energy to use inside the brain.
How smart is that idea? It's powered by your very own blood, the very own blood that it works and moves through to get up to your brain. That is such a genius idea. Balsam, how did you hear about the Young Imagineers? What made you want to enter?
Well, my teacher, Miss Williams, she knows I'm very into my science and love designing stuff, so she told me about the competition. So then I was very interested to just give it a go and do my best, and, well, I arrived in the top 10.
What was it like then presenting your idea to the judges?
Well, at first it was a bit nerve-wracking and kind of, your heart's beating really hard and your brain, your vision's going all fuzzy and all of that. But once I got into the middle of my presentation, I kind of started to feel more in control and to be able to kind of just do the presentation better and know what I was saying and all of that.
Are you going to keep on inventing things? You said that your teacher knows that you like to design sciencey stuff. Has winning this given you any more ideas or inspiration for things that you can make?
Well, to be honest, I don't have any new ideas, but in the future I would definitely keep on inventing new ideas to help the world and transportation and things like that.
Transportation? Have you got any ideas what you want to be when you grow up, Balsam?
As I said, with transportation, I want to design environmentally friendly cars with lots of, let's just say, advanced technology features to entertain the riders or the passengers in the car.
Do you still play, PlayStation games and things like that, like normal kids, or when we're doing that, are you busy designing microspiders and environmentally friendly cars?
Well, to be honest, it's kind of a mixture. Sometimes I'm spending my time to do some kind of technology games, and sometimes I'm doing kind of designing and making my own kind of mini inventions and things like that.
Brilliant. Well, Balsam, you're an utter inspiration. It's an incredible design, this micro spider, and the logo looks awesome as well. Well, congratulations for winning Equinor's Young Imagineers competition for 2019. It's been a real treat to speak to you, Balsam. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dan.
It's time for this week's Science in the News. A British power plant, which makes 5% of the UK's power, says it plans to go carbon negative by 2030. The plant, which is in North Yorkshire in England, it's already largely powered by renewable fuel. They say they're going to scale up the system so they can catch more carbon than they produce. Also, electric charges on dust grains may help explain how planets are born. A lab experiment suggests that electrostatic forces are key to overcoming the bouncing barrier. Now, this is an obstacle to forming planets. The bouncing barrier stops matter clumping together because they bounce apart. But new research from scientists at the University of Cambridge has shown that strange forces help particles stick together. And finally, infrared images reveal hidden tattoos on ancient Egyptian mummies. Scientists have used this technology to see what was there on the bones, and they've seen images on 7 mummies from around 3,000 years ago. They don't know who the mummies are yet, but they're thought to be artists or craft workers who built and decorated royal tombs. And that is it for this week's Fun Kids Science Weekly. Thank you so much for having a listen and for coming aboard to explore the universe with me. If you've got a science question that you want answered on this show, we rattled through quite a lot earlier on, so we've got some space. Just leave it as a review for us over on the Apple Podcast Store. Find the Fun Kids Science Weekly. Drop your question in the comment box at the bottom. You can leave your name and give us 5 stars as well. That'll really help me out. Either I will do all the research like I did today, or I'll get a proper expert in that field to come on and answer it for you. Now, it's almost Christmas, so I know that you may be getting new devices that you can listen to. Maybe listen to this on. Maybe your mates are getting new phones, new tablets, new smart speakers. If you know that they are, do us a favour, point them in the direction of the Fun Kids Science Weekly. Get them to download the podcast. You can explain how awesome we are. Now, if you listen to our show on Apple Podcasts, you can find a whole load of other amazing Fun Kids Science series on there. You've heard some today. We've got loads more. They're also on Google. They're on Spotify, wherever you get your shows from. And Fun Kids are a children's radio station from the UK. You can have a listen to us on the DAB digital radio, on that free Fun Kids app, and at funkidslive.com.